Welcome to another edition of the March to a Million podcast with your host, Greg DuPont. I'm RJ Malik, producer of the podcast. And Greg, as always, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing great, RJ. Good to see you as well. Thanks for joining me today for what's going to be a fun conversation.
Okay, then why don't you start with the conversation and I'll chime in when I can.
Please chime in because I don't want this to be just a monologue of me rambling on, or otherwise known as a diatribe.
Okay.
But I came upon something. I actually, a friend of mine posted a long video yesterday about some conversations he had with some of his virtual crew working back over in we'll call it third world, because I'm going to talk about first world problems and third world problems today a little bit, and the what we need to be thinking about as American citizens, so what we're dealing with here. And it's been a little while since I've rocked your world, RJ, and had one of those moments where you say at the end of the show, "Oh, Greg, you kind of hit me with a lot there." And today's going to be one of those days.
Okay, I'm ready.
But before we go down what could be a dark and gloomy path that I think people need to pay attention to, I think it's a sign. Because I try to balance the good and the bad on this show and try to educate. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the bad today. But you know me, I'm a student of all things on the cutting edge of science. I get a lot of that stuff. And as I was doing show prep for today, I had a message pop up. And I'm going to just kind of read from it because I think it's interesting context. The message shows on X. It says, "This is wild. MIT just solved one of the hardest unsolved problems in robotics. For decades, the fundamental problem with soft robots and wearable exoskeletons has not been compute or AI. It has been actuation, the movements, right? That stuff."
Sure.
"The moment you try to give a soft robot meaningful strength, you run into the same wall every engineer has hit since the field began. Fluid-driven systems require external pumps, hydraulic reservoirs, and heavy infrastructure that makes the entire thing impractical to wear or embed into the fabric." By the way, this is from a poster by the name of Milk Road AI, something like that. Okay. "MIT's new electrofluidic fiber muscles solve that problem by eliminating external infrastructure entirely. The key insight is electrohydrodynamic pumping." That was your PhD, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I thought. You look like an electrohydrodynamic pumping kind of guy.
Oh yeah, I'm all over that.
But so the key insight is electrohydrodynamic pumping. Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah.
"Using electric fields to generate pressure directly from electricity with no moving parts, no motors, and no external fluid reservoir. The fibers are less than 2 millimeters thick, can be woven into fabric like ordinary textiles, and operate in complete silence because nothing physically moves inside them. It's just ions propelling fluid through a closed circuit. The performance numbers published in Science Robotics are not conceptual. They're empirical results from actual hardware. These fibers achieve a power density of 50 watts per kilogram, whatever the hell that means, right? Matching skeletal muscle with a contraction strain of 20% and response time of 0.3 seconds. A single bundle configuration lifted 4 kilograms, 200 times its own weight, while a separate configuration drove a robotic arm through a 40-degree bend compliant enough to safely complete a human handshake. Another configuration launched objects in under 100 milliseconds, which is faster than a human flinch reflex. The design mirrors biological muscle architecture in a way that prior artificial muscle approaches never achieved. The fibers are organized into antagonistic pairs. One contracts while the other extends, just like our muscles, exactly like biceps and triceps. And because the system runs in a closed loop, the relaxing fiber serves as the fluid reservoir for the contracting one, which is what allows the whole system to operate untethered with no external tank.
Can this be adapted into helping human beings, especially those who are suffering from paralysis?
Great question. The applications are not hypothetical, but rather are the exact use cases the industry has been waiting years for the hardware to catch up to. Exoskeletons for physical labor, prosthetic limbs that move with the natural compliance of a biological tissue,
Wow.
assistive garments for patients with motor disorders, and soft robots capable of safe physical contact with humans that are all immediately unlocked by a muscle technology that is silent, lightweight, and weavable into clothing. Isn't it amazing?
There's a lot there. And yes, it is amazing. And it just sounds like they're just scratching the surface. And this could just help so many people in so many different ways, not only physical, but this could help businesses.
It's just another example of the brave new world we're heading into and not using it in the Aldous Huxley phase, right? I mean, you are just enough younger than I, that you may not have watched The $6 Million Man in real schedule.
No, I think I'm older than you.
I thought you were under 60.
Oh no.
So you watched it while I watched it. So we both watched it.
Yes, I remember the $6 Million Man. Yes, we can rebuild him.
That's right. Well, here it is happening, right? It's happening right in front of our eyes. Yeah. And so to get to the downer side of what I want to talk about today, now that we have a little bit of a glimpse, the glow at the end of this rainbow, right, or this tunnel, that could be a train coming our way, but So what my friend posted resonated with some other things I'd heard from other people that are in agriculture, and what he was talking about was he had a couple of his virtual assistants that were over in India, and I can't remember the other one was, but over there, and what they were relaying to him was how their families were farm families, and how because of the lack of fertilizers as a result of the strait, they're not planting rice. And I've heard a similar thing about American farmers that are not planting certain crops because of the lack of fertilizer. And this is where our headlines for the last several weeks with the state of news have been the price of gas.
Right.
But this is really where these first world problems, which we're dealing with, price of gas, and third world problems, which are the very ability to survive. They're talking about the possibility of famine as a result of the lack of having the fertilizer to plant the basic crops to support their communities. And it's something that we need to keep an eye on. And this is where I'm going to kind of breach into politics a little bit, although I try to avoid politics on this conversation as much as possible. We have to understand what's going on. And, if the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, we won't go into whether or not the president made the right decision or wrong decision on going there. Okay. But we're there right now. This is what we're dealing with. And the fact that nobody in any of the major other countries are working in conjunction with us to open the strait. And that's what's going to really be the catalyst for what could be a catastrophic human event with starvation and such. It's not about gas.
No, I mean, that's a point that you made. The fact that you don't see that in the news, you're the only thing you see is gas prices, gas prices, gas prices, gas prices.
If it weren't for the fact that politically, we have to understand what the world is going on around us, and you and I, we have little subtle differences of opinion on certain things, and And that's the American way, right? But so much of us are really center with just a little bit to either side.
Right.
We have core things that we can all agree on,
Yes.
but the noise is on the periphery. And I contend, because our president is such a polarizing person, that these countries that could have come in to help to unlock the strait, to get fertilizer flowing, to get gas flowing, are refusing to do it because they want to hoist him on his own petard.
I think that's part of it, but I also think, to be honest, I don't think they're capable of helping. I don't think they want to be embarrassed, and I don't think they want to show the world how unprepared they are for situations like this. That's part of it. I think what you said.
You make a valid point.
I think what you said is a valid point. I agree with that, but I think there's more to it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that particular angle of it, but the fact that it's left on to us to try to fix the problem that we created, right, or however you want to phrase it, as punishment. Well, the collateral punishment is not going to be the U.S. consumers. We might have prices, but we're not going to have mass starvation that is out there for other people that could be there. And when we think about the political environment that we're in, everything is done for as much revenue generation from the political parties as possible. And so, when I speak of the future, the march to million, and all that stuff, it's because these things are on the horizon. So is it really a situation where we are going to have to, suffer through famine? Really, do we have to do that? And to get to this land where we've got now electrochemical whatchamajiggies running our clothing, right? That's getting us where we need to be. It's just a mind-boggling time that we're in, RJ. Can you make some sense of it for me, please?
Yes, it's mind-boggling, it's frustrating, but at the same time, if you look at history and being old enough to be able to look back to the 70s and the 80s, I mean, there was always that drumbeat that this is a major catastrophe. This is going to be a major catastrophe. And somehow we progress through it. I think sometimes we have to really take a step back. And unfortunately, and it's a business that I spent my entire career in, the media does things for their own purposes. If it bleeds, it leads. That's a statement that's been going on in the media world forever. So if they can create headlines, not libel anybody, not lie, not, but create situations where this is a possibility so people consume their product so they can make some more money. I know what I'm saying is probably a little cynical, but I spent several decades in the media world.
You earned a license to be cynical. And if we take that one step further, so if it bleeds, it leads. Yeah, but if it aches and pains, we're gonna highlight that in the ads. When we look at all the money supporting the cable news and regular news is all medical.
That is also more eyes will go to that story because people will want to know about that. People don't really, unfortunately, people don't go to the happy news first. Yeah, they'll eventually get there. But if someone's suffering or possibly something happens that could cause your own personal suffering, that's where they go to first.
As we had confirmed earlier on, we're about the same age.
Yep. Yep.
So we both lived through the bicentennial.
Yes.
Right? And is your recollection the same as mine in the sense that by this time of the year, that thing was already being hyped up beyond belief? The bicentennial was the biggest thing that was ever going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
And here we are approaching 250 this summer. And you don't hear too much about it, do you?
No, and there are reasons for it. And again, the cynic in me says, well, the majority of the media does not like our current president. They don't like the fact that Republicans control both the House and the Senate. They don't like that. So they're not beating the drum. If this was, a Democrat, it would be nonstop. And I hate to say it, but if you really look at it, when you're talking about the major media, the television, ABC, CBS, NBC, the big cable networks, Fox and CNN and MS Now, whatever it's called, they all have an agenda now. And we're now, I think, looking at it, and you have to know that they have an agenda, and you have to, okay, they're giving us information, but they're giving the information and they're presenting it to you the way they want to present it, not the way it should be presented. So, they're showing it to you, and look at how it's this way, and it's bad. And then another network who's pro-Trump will say, oh, no, it doesn't look that way. It looks this way. And you sort of, the average American is now in a position where we have to dissect and find more information. Part of me doesn't think that's a bad thing, because if you do some homework on your own, you'll learn more, and you won't have knee-jerk reactions when the other organizations that have I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it. They have an agenda. You can see through the agenda, and you can say, yeah, okay, I understand what they're doing, but I've done my research. I've done my reading. I've done, looked at different things, and it's not exactly the way it is. And this way you can then be a little calmer and not be pulling out your hair and end up like myself. So, I mean, that's the way I look at it.
The give and take of that is that, some people, the way we are right now, when they go and try to find out more information, they just go down a self-reinforcing path.
Right.
And we are just becoming more and more polarized. And to bring this back to the future and preparing and protecting for the future. So the one reason I wanted to bring this to the conversation today was, it's tough right now. We're dealing with high gas prices, and all of that is a front runner to some other things that are going to come down the road. So, even if we open the Strait up tomorrow, gas is going to take a while to come back down. But these things like, are there going to be, is there going to be less wheat in the fall? Are we going to have those type of commodities now inflate? And, are we going to have the press, because from what you just said, because they've got their agenda. They're going to make sure that if there is, famine in Kenya, it's all because of the decision that Trump made to go into here, and not because anybody else was mismanaging or couldn't help or whatever. And meanwhile, when we get to the other end of this, things like I talked about at the beginning of this program are just there for us. So what we need to do as thinkers, as people that are trying to protect ourselves and our family, is we need to be looking long term. When I first had my prompting for the March to Million in 2030 being the date that I picked, Well, that's because I felt at that time that there was a huge probability that on the eve of 2030, it's kind of an anniversary of its own. We're talking about the Great Depression, okay? That these factors that we're dealing with as a society are going to kick in, and the market will react violently to it.
Right.
We get to the other side, we're okay. But get to the other side. So this is why people need to be, moving out of just being in a spot where they're blindly keeping everything in the market. The market is going up inexplicably still.
Right.
My guest I was going to have on today, who'll be back on a later time, is a longtime veteran of the market that when he and I were talking privately, he's like, this doesn't make any sense. None of these things make any sense, yet it's still going up.
Yes.
But we don't know what the future is going to bring with that. If we start coming into the midterms, because the midterms are key, it is a turning point for this country, one way or the other. Trump was a turning point for the country, whether it stays in this path. And I'm not saying right or wrong, but we would be in a completely different place if he was not the president. Whether it be right, better or not, neither of them are dealing with the underlying deficit issues.
That's a major, major point that very few politicians, probably Rand Paul is the exception. He's the only one that I know consistently talks about the deficit that we have. And neither side is really taking serious action. And I mean, even closer to home, I live in New Jersey, and we're right close to New York. My wife, works with a New York company, so we pay attention to what's going on in New York. And I grew up on Long Island, so it's always something that I pay attention to. And they have a new mayor in New York City, and he's polarizing, and he's doing things, and I'm sitting back. This is totally my observation, in my opinion. I mean, I can see that he is just throwing out information that makes no sense. And this is a problem that he's not being called on. He just came out and said, I just balanced the budget. Well, he balanced the budget because he got $4 billion from Albany. So he didn't do anything. He just kicked the can down the road. And unfortunately, that's a common practice by our leadership.
You're in the shadow of New York. I'm dead in Middle America, Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
And we're number 2 with a bullet to replace Minneapolis as the fraud capital of America. And there's one connection between Columbus and Minneapolis. And we are number 1 and number 2 in a certain community in terms of immigrants.
This goes back to, and again, and you tell me, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but it goes back to what happened back in 2020. You can't have open borders. You just can't. You have to know who is coming into this country. I'm all for immigration. Listen, I'm from, my grandfather on my father's side came over from Ukraine when he was in the 3rd grade, early 1900s. On my mom's side, the family came over again, early 1900s. So, I'm very much aware of what this country's all about. But they all came over and they were legal immigrants, legal. And there's a reason why you do that. You can't have chaos. Chaos leads to problems.
I in thinking about that the other day, it came to me in the following way. It's like when you have some form of underlying illness, you're terminal, whatever. Okay, you got the flu or whatever. You've got some underlying illness and you're weakened. and then another that makes you more susceptible to another thing. And that's really what happened with the influx of illegal aliens and what have you. And because it started, I'll say it started with a big heart, with good motives.
Absolutely.
We are a country of immigrants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there was an assumption made that those that were coming wanted to be like those that have come before.
Mm-hmm.
And there are not all of them, but there are just enough of them that are coming with a different mission.
Yes.
And because of political correctness, we have allowed that mission to go unquestioned. And now the virus has spread. And how do we get it back? So I mentioned, Columbus and the fraud. And if you think about the context of the amount of money that was fraudulently obtained, how much of that stayed in the U.S. borders versus how much left?
I would say, again, my opinion, it's an opinion. It's a guess, but I would say the majority of it left the country.
Yeah, when they first had Doge and started talking about fraud in the system, macroeconomically, I looked at it and said, okay, what will happen when all this money is no longer floating into the system because of these bad deals? And I was really concerned about, okay, if you shut that fraud down, now you're just gonna pull money out of the system and you're gonna crash the economy. I become a little bit less concerned with that when the money is not coming into us, but it's going to places that are not here.
Right. Agreed.
But that's why it all keeps going, because it's all intertwined. And getting back to the virus and the underlying illness and our conversation earlier about polarization, people don't want to recognize that there are just enough people on both of those extremes that do have an agenda, that agenda that is to wind up the people that are not as advanced to that position, but are susceptible, and wind them up and try to make that more of an impactful position. That a Mayor Mondami, who does not represent the beliefs of 80% of New York, maybe even represents 20 that voted for him, but that wasn't really a truly representative sample of the community.
Yeah, that's a whole, we could spend the whole episode on that situation and just New York City in general and what's happening to that city, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of money going in and out.
But for today, we need to wrap this up with some lessons and some learnings and some guidance, because that's what we're here for. Again, the primary reason for bringing up the third world effect of what's going on right now is for you to think, as a listener, to kind of realize that there is these externalities that are being caused by this, and it will lead to some scarcity of certain things. So, hey, you might want to stock up on some things because it will get more expensive or scarce altogether in the fall. And to know that this too is temporary. It'll pass. And when we open up with a little bit of that ray of sunshine, what's on the other side? On the other side is abundant health, is abundant energy, is a healthy life. I mean, what will that Steve Austin technology do for people that have, that can't move like they used to, or whatever, right? It's just that those advances are coming at us so quickly that we really can't absorb them. But if you trace it, we got so much stuff coming good our way. It's going to be a beautiful future.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Before you go, how about some contact information?
Best way to reach out to me and join my ecosystem is to go to www.gsdupont.com. It's kind of a central hub for all the things that I do.
All right, Greg, thank you. As always, pleasure talking with you. If you've not subscribed to the March to a Million podcast, make sure you do that. If you know of an estate planning attorney, financial advisor, or a client who really needs this information, please make sure you share this podcast with them. So for Greg DuPont, I'm RJ Malik, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.